What is up? Welcome to the Smalley Talk podcast. This is your host, Josh Shrinko. Chris Vaughn is absent. He is not with us tonight. We were hoping he might be able to join, but he is on his way up to, I believe it was uh, the lake that was described as Smallmouth Disneyland. So going up to St. Clair right now, doing a little family vacay. I love how Chris just figures out how to convince his family to take vacations in prime smallmouth destinations. So I'm hoping we might be able to get him on the podcast live later this week while he's up there. But he'll be up there trying to figure out the big pond, and good luck to him. But kind of in his place, I have actually spent some time with this guy. He's been on the podcast before, and I thought it'd be a good fill-in, maybe permanently. Maybe he just comes and replaces Chris. I don't know. We'll kind of have to see how it goes. This man needs no introduction. Jeff Little, welcome to Smalley Talk. How's it going?
Doing good, Josh.
So me and you, we shared a hotel room here. When was it? About 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
Spent a lot of time in our underwear together.
right.
So yeah, it was a good
Speaking of
time.
that, do you is this a pants optional podcast? Because it's really hot here in Maryland, and
I have no pants on currently,
there you go.
so it's always pants optional.
All right,
Um,
I'm fitting in.
so yeah, no, we ended up going up to the Kayak Adventure Series event in Whitehall, Michigan, a few weeks ago, and we were both kind of there as vendors. But as we sort of figure out how to do in every destination we go to, we got some fishing in, figured out how
Yeah,
to carve some time out, and yeah, we had a good time.
yeah,
So,
for sure.
so
Um, there's actually another one coming up that I'm leaving on Friday, and I got a bunch of dealer visits for Boondocks in Missouri, Arkansas. One in Kansas, I may make it to. I'm not really sure. And I want to say I knock that out. I don't want to say I give anyone's the bum's rush, but I do that, and I I go and see these kayak shops and work with them, and then I find somewhere to fish, and I don't know. It's kind of a narrow window this time. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get it in. I'm going to hustle and see if I can do it somewhere in Missouri or Arkansas because there's a lot of
I have faith that
water.
you can figure out how to catch a couple of smallmouth.
It's like
Um,
16 dealers in like 4 days.
hmm.
So we'll see.
Well, if you
And,
spend
and
1
I
minute
cast.
per dealer, 1 minute per dealer,
Yeah.
that's 16 minutes, and then you just can fish the rest of the time.
Here's the thing
Uh,
though. If someone's like engaging with me, like they get the rest of the afternoon. And
yeah.
you know, it's that job is first, and I'm glad to have it.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I think this is probably a good time to kinda update the listeners. I don't know, it's probably been a couple years since we had you on, last, and at that point, I think you, were working for Torito,
Yep.
and Jeff, those who may not be in the sort of the kayak world, Jeff kind of brought Torpedo to the U.S. kayak market, for to kind of summarize it, and he, made a pretty big impact on the kayak fishing industry, specifically the tournament industry. A lot of guys switching over to kind of motors and that sort of thing, but
I
you
will
have a
back
little.
up and say it was really Chad Hoover that brought it to kayak fishing here in the U.S. because he was over there in Germany, stationed there with the Navy, and met those
Oh,
guys
okay.
and said, yeah, you guys are putting these on sea kayaks. I can't see that, but man, I got dudes back in Virginia Beach with no legs that would love to kayak fish. Vets that they do things with heroes on the water to get them out there. But man, to have a motor, and that was his drive behind this needs to be a thing, and that's why he implemented it into kayak bass fishing in the tournament series to say, hey, there needs to be a market for this. So yeah, everyone can use them. That was the beginning of it. What I did for
Yeah.
7 years is and whatever I could, like trade show management, made videos of installing everything I possibly could. Yeah, any video or any kayak I could get my hands on, from an inflatable to like the Blue Sky to whatever kayak I could get my hand on, I did install videos. And that a lot of that video production is why Boondocks looked at me and said, "Man, we would love to have him on our team." And that happened back in December. And I've been kind of going nuts doing whatever videos I can of their existing product, but we also have new stuff coming. And a lot of it is centered not so much around the kayak, although we've done the console, which is sold really well, and some accessories that go on that. But we got the T-bone and the landing gears, the bread and butter. That's what carries the company. But we're doing stuff with truck camping. And just as I did with Torito, I can't sell it if I don't live it, truly. And that comes, everything from, if you watch my videos on Little Stuff YouTube, you've seen that I've been camping in the drifter hammock, even in temperatures down to 26 degrees, and going to a lot of these really, really great smallmouth destinations. Erie for sure. I mean, home water is the Susquehanna. Got that personal best out in Idaho. You talk about smallmouth.
We'll talk about that for sure.
That place is special. It's not easy, but it's special. And just a lot of really good river smallmouth fisheries. I'm using that equipment, but also they're putting me on the road with with new prototype equipment, metal rod boxes, rooftop tent, gearboxes for the side. Anyone who's going to be at ICAST, you're going to see that rig. So it's product development, and
So
it's been a fun.
can you back up? I know. So you're the rep. Are you like over the whole country for Boondocks? Is that?
No. I have most of the country. There's Joe Comiati, he's a sales rep that has Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Those are his area. But like, I do the rest of it. And it's not that I don't go to those states. I go to all of them. So
Okay. And then Boondocks is a company, so I'm familiar with them because I've kayak fished for a long time. But I kind of have known, I wasn't really sure what they were. At some point I did connect them to the T-bone thing. But I wasn't really, the landing gear is probably the thing that I kind of had seen more of, maybe just because I follow you and I'd seen that on some stuff. But tell us a little bit about Boondocks as a company, because I think they're kind of a cool, like their operation's cool. So tell us a little bit about them.
So the parent company is called Bartimaeus by Design, and this guy Eddie Brinkley started it like 4 decades or so ago. He lives in that area in North Carolina where historically most of the furniture in the world was made for a long time, that Thomasville High Point area. But he was a sales guy like me, and he looked around in his community and noticed, like, yeah, there's another welder lost his job. This machinist lost his job. All of these U.S. metal fabrication jobs were being lost overseas, China in particular. But all of the furniture companies that needed, whether it was metal legs for a stool or a frame for a pull-out couch or bed frames or tabletops that are metal or whatever it was, not the finished product, but the pieces. He said, "You know what? This sucks. I think we can. We can start something here, even if it's small, and wrestle back some of that business." And they have for for over 4 decades. And um, his son, Chad Brinkley, is really the founder of Boondocks. Came up in that being the family business, and he went to North Carolina State to get his engineering degree so he could do the design work for Dad's business. But
That's
as
cool.
he, yeah, it is cool, and they're a cool family. But they always made stuff like they surf fished down the Outer Banks, and he kayak fished, and you know made friends with a lot of guys that worked the shop floor. And when they needed like a bed extender that didn't scrape on that steep little apron, grind out and the weld bust out, hey, let's not re-weld that. Let's like go over to the pipe bender there in the corner and just make one that instead of going right angle just kind of scoops up. And that was the T-bone. And they just made things that they needed, and that became, hey, we could probably sell these. Hey, let's get these pedal drive boats that have the rudders that are flexible. Let's make metal ones and turn them like that instead of, so whatever they saw a need for, they're like, yeah, let's. And that's really what it comes down to. I think true innovators think in terms of like, what is it that I want? What is, what's out there that I look at on the market and say, not good enough. I can make this, or I can get someone to make it, and that's what drives, things like the custom rod business. It's certainly, and we can talk about inflatables, what drove me to design an inflatable and work with innovative sportsmen. That's a whole other podcast we could talk about, but
We're going to talk about it some because you finagled me into buying one, so I got one on the way.
cool.
But yeah, for
So
sure.
Innovators usually do things that they personally want. And Boondocks is full of things that they personally want, that somebody said, what's out there either doesn't exist or isn't good enough. And it's pretty cool bringing me into the fold as someone that does so much life on the road and really moving in the direction of camping out of the truck, in cutting the cord with regard to always being at a hotel or Airbnb some of the time. I tell you, I would not have been able to do what I did at Dwarf Shack had it not been for the ability to camp out and have what I needed right there at that very remote location. And really, that's what you get when you camp with your vehicle, and it's quick setup, quick tear down, and everything's taken care of. Is you get more fishing time back because you're not driving 45 minutes, an hour and 15, hour and a half to get to the water and then back each other. There's 3 hours that you're not fishing. So when you have good, your domicile on wheels, that it's so liberating. It's so nice to be able to just put it in park, set up your rooftop tent, drift, or whatever it is that you have, and get to bed and get up early and go have a nice long day on the water.
Oh yeah, I think that's something that a lot of guys that are into kayak fishing do, just mainly because kayak fishing is sort of primitive in its nature, or
Yeah.
used to be anyways. It's getting more advanced, but you don't need necessarily to, have full, hotel room electric and all that stuff. Like you can sort of get by with more of a primitive setup. So it's cool, man.
The
It's
next
neat.
thing I'm going to do though is with the drifter. I know I got this pretty cool new rooftop tent. I got a video coming out, fishing some Kentucky water, which was my first night with the rooftop tent. But I'm going to go back to the drifter and do some island camping with it on the Susquehanna.
I want one of those rooftop tents, though. We're gonna be talking about that,
Okay.
because I've been looking to get one for my Forerunner for a while now.
Yeah.
Um, so, as far as, you obviously they have the T-bone, the landing gear. You got some new stuff coming out. I've seen some. I actually got to see that rod box in person, so you got a new, like, metal
So
rod box that mounts to the bar on
there's
the
going to
truck?
be two different rod boxes, and they're both going to be metal rod boxes, 8 feet in length and one is going to be a box. And if you look at some of my recent videos on the Little Stuff YouTube, you're going to see those previews of me using that Rod Pro. And I forget, I think I got like 9 rods in it, just using one end. You can actually put them in from either side, because I had the one side up against the glass, the rear window of the cab. I couldn't get in that way, but if you put it on a trailer, you put it on a roof rack, you put it even just a little further back on whatever overlanding rack you have, and you can get it in at both sides. I think you could probably get somewhere in the neighborhood of like 14 to 16 rods in it. So it's your high capacity, really super nice metal rod box with locks on both sides. And some of the refining that we had to do that came about as my trip from, I started in North Carolina, went down to the Kayak Adventure Series on the Flint River, or Thomaston, Georgia, which was Flint, Ocmulgee, and I guess you could have been on the Hooch. I went to the West Coast, went all the way to San Diego, up to Portland, and then back through the northern, part of it, using it and saying, all right, these are the things that that aren't good enough, that we need to change. For sure, a liner that they did, and then there's going to be some kind of, I'm going to say a pillow, but it's more along the lines of like a padded pool noodle that you roll in on top of the rods to keep them down against that liner, to really. So, I mean, that's some of the refinement of me getting on the road with it and making sure that it is good enough. But that's going to be one option, and that one's actually going to be here sooner than later. The second one, this Friday, I'm going to go down to Thomasville, North Carolina, and pick up and assemble. And really, both of them come in 2 parts, because to ship something that is 8 feet long, like, you have to pay so much. And that was one of the main things, is we have to make it shippable so people can afford. You don't have this massive shipping cost. It's still not going to be cheap to ship, but it's not going to be like, are you kidding? Like, that makes me not want to buy it, because I'm going to spend $300-400 on shipping.
Right.
Like, that's ridiculous. So you do have to assemble it and put it together, and I'll do that with the rod tube, which is going to be the more price friendly option. Not as high capacity, but you can actually do 2 of them, and I may end up doing 2 of them at some point. I had the precursor to that on my red F-150 earlier this year. So if you watched any of my stuff from like February, March, and April, I had the one that was a solid piece, which we moved away from that. And they called that legacy product was called the Mamba, but it's a metal rod tube that has a good lock on the end. And they've done some.
It is metal. Is the new one metal that you guys are launching?
Both of them are metal. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because that's the big disadvantage of like PVC, right? Because all those guys have PVC. Like, all it takes is a Sawzall, and you can have yourself some free rods.
Right.
No, that's cool. So you
can do it with metal too. It's just going to be louder and take you longer.
Yeah,
probably going to ruin some things inside that you won't want anymore. But
yeah, for sure. So you have the rod box, the rod tube, the rooftop tent. When's the rooftop tent sort of slated to be available?
We don't make them. So everything that we sell, with the exception of that so far, is made there. Even, and I kind of had one dealer in Tennessee that was like, well, what about the hammock itself? Surely you get that made in India, China, or whatever. They didn't say that, but that's what they meant. I'm like, no, there's, like, I know the lady that works down in the upholstery section that sits there and sews it. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it is. But the rooftop tents, if you want to look them up, it's James Baroud, Baroud. The one I'm using is called the Grand Raid, and it's the size M. There's I think one or two larger sizes that you can have for multiple people, but like it's for me, and I fit in it great. Um, and basically, we're making things that we're using. If you know the extrusion, the four-sided, we call it the groovy extrusion, that is the T-bone or the knuckles of the landing gear. It's basically got four track on all four sides, and
Yeah.
it's got a square hole in the middle that the connecting rod of the two halves of the landing gear. We're using that to basically offer you Legos to build whatever kind of rack you need, including ones that can support the rooftop tent. The thing that's actually and ones that you can have it across angle, like in the all of the hardware and stuff to like basically if you have a pickup truck and you put two bars like that, and then you can have two runners coming out the back that are bunks that you can adjust to the width of your kayak. That's some of what I'm going to be showing off here. In fact, you can actually see some of that right now on my Instagram page, which is Jeff Little Kayak Fishing. In any case, totally modular that you can build, whether you're building onto a trailer where you're like, okay, I want to have a rooftop tent and a spot for two kayaks on the bottom, rooftop tent on the side, and then like a rod box here and then a gear box on the side. Whatever, you can just get creative with this stuff. And if you're building it on a trailer, great. If you're building it on your truck bed, great. If you're building it on a roof rack, you can do all of that stuff. So it's kind of giving you the tools to get creative and say, here's the extrusion, here's the parts that marry it together, whether you're doing the Lincoln log thing or whether you're putting the extrusion on a flat surface like my truck right now. There's these two gearboxes, which are like, think of a work truck and those diamond plated, boxes that go on the side where you don't, when it's a work truck, usually they take the bed off and they have the whole thing is locking boxes. It's like that, except it sits on the rails of the truck bed. And what that does is it gets things like your PFD and your net and all your wet, stinky crap that you don't want in the cab of the truck, but you don't want laying in the bed of the truck where it can be stolen. It keeps it secure, and it keeps the stink out of your vehicle, and just organizes your stuff. That is how my rooftop tent is supported. But in your case, you would put it on the roof rack, and we'll have what you need to put it up there as well. So
Cool. Well, sounds like you guys got a lot of stuff coming. So we'll definitely be on the lookout for that.
yep,
So you'll have it at some ICAST booths, correct? You'll have some of that stuff.
sort of.
Yeah, unofficially. Yeah. Uh,
It's if you come see. So I'm going to ICAST for Torito because I am still associated with Torito. I'm not an employee. I'm not a sales rep. I am a member of Team Torito because I still believe in the product. It's it's the original, and I worked really hard to have that mount and test that 3 horsepower electric outboard, and I don't know. I'm still so vested in that and believe in it. I really believe in the product. So I'm going there to work the Torquedo booth. But if you look for me at the in-water, you may see my truck there. So
yeah, I gotcha.
you may have like big Yeti 65 cooler in the back of it on the tailgate, or there's like a trailer hitch thing that you can let your Yeti 65 like ride back there, and I'll probably have that thing iced down with water and Red Bulls, and
Cool.
come check out the truck while you're getting something to drink.
Yeah, that sounds good. So we're 25 minutes in. We haven't talked smallmouth, so we got shift into second gear here.
Sure.
So first, I'll a little in between here. I did order an Innovative Sportsman Osprey 1436. Trey is in the process of packing that up and sending it to
Cool.
me. So I got that. I wanted a Jeff convinced me that I needed a motorized sort of vessel to keep up with him, primarily because somehow, I don't even know how, convinced Jeff to fish his second tournament he's ever fished. So,
I fished more than
uh,
two, but
uh,
it's it's not my thing. But yeah,
well,
you know,
second tournament in a long time. Or first tournament in a long time.
yeah.
So you and
I
I
think
are
the last
teaming.
one I did was the kayak, or it was kayak saltwater series, and it was a striper
Mhm.
tournament, and it was like a month-long deal, and I won it. And but I did it to help my friend Chad like promote it in
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
The only way it's, I'm going to say, palatable to me, and I'm not anti-tournament. I love actually chasing someone with a video camera. That's a lot of my content. Is tournament coverage. I'm just ill at ease in competition, and I have to snow myself into just saying I'm just fishing. And if I do that, I do
Mhm.
pretty well. So,
Yeah.
but the whole
Well,
team thing is
we're
kind of cool.
yeah, we're teaming up. Teams I don't know what our team's gonna be called yet, but
Come
you and
on,
I are teaming up. I don't know.
Drifter and Wet
We could
Boy.
go
There you go.
we that's what I was thinking. I wasn't sure if you were gonna go that direction. But so I will say this about the Kayak Adventure Series. I got a chance to sort of be around that for a whole weekend. It is um a much more of a like less low stress um event than like some of the other tournament trails. It's a lot more laid back.
Yeah,
The format's really good. There's a team division.
it's less
Um,
restrictive.
what's that?
The rules are less
Yeah,
restrictive.
very yeah, very much so. You can fish in a radius, so you can fish lakes and rivers. It's not trying to be a bass boat tournament, which I feel like a lot of them are trying to be a bass boat tournament more and more. This is definitely Drew's brainchild, and it's way more. Uh,
It's Drew like taking all of his frustrations
mhm,
of 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 rules that were made by whiners. No, rules that were made by tournament directors that listen too much to the whiners,
mhm,
about
for
people that
sure.
work, that put in effort to get to places where the whiners are too lazy to get to. That's it.
Yeah,
He built a trail that says, "Oh, this is, yeah, you want to slog up like 12 miles of river that has no water in it to like get to that one spot. Yeah, it's on you. Go for it.
mhm, for
Do it."
sure. Yeah, and I think Drew has been on the show to talk about this before, but I got to see it in practice, and it is very well done. Drew is put so much on the line, so much effort and time into, and probably money into this venture. And the one that I went to, I was actually kind of irritated that I didn't fish the tournament because I was like, oh, this would have been a really fun thing to fish. Um, so I was like, hey, let's Jeff, I actually just said, "Hey, you should fish the Wisconsin River one." And you're like, "Hey, do you wanna team up?" And we sorta decided to do that. So, I wasn't about to be pedaling my Hobie behind your Torquedo and,
Yeah.
like, eating your wake all day. So, I got myself a little you convinced me, you talked about that inflatable all week, and I did some thinking on it, how I could use it, not just in 1 or 2 tournaments, but how could I actually use it at home, and without going too much into it, because I don't want this to turn into an inflatable kayak, um, episode, um, I kinda see it as, like, in between my, like, Hobie and my jet boat. So, like, there comes a point where the water gets too low to safely run a jet, especially in certain stretches of certain rivers. But, to go upstream in the Hobie is sort of a big ask. So like this is like in between. I can launch it when the water's low. I can use it to kind of do more exploratory floats. And it can go in places my jet boat can't get into. But you can also like I think the cool thing about that, which I'm going to be taking it to the Susquehanna here in about 3 weeks. And I've been keeping an eye on the gauges. It's pretty low. I think it's like kind of normal summer low right now. I don't think it's like necessarily lower than usual, but it's summer pool. Um, you can pop the motor up on that and drag it really easily because it
Yep.
floats.
So
So
the inflatables are the biggest advantage is shallow draft.
mhm,
You start rubbing in a rotomolded boat, depending on which one it is, on objects that are between 5 and 9 inches below the surface. I know this because I've done surveys where you ask people to put their kayak on the pavement and just get an average of the mud line, right? If
right.
you do that, it's between 5 and 9 inches. With the inflatable, things that are 2.25 inches below the surface, you just scoot right over. The freedom that you get from going in 2.5 inches, you don't get it until you get it. And even with that, things that are at the surface, things that are just wet, with that motor, you just Dukes of Hazard some stuff. I mean, you just jump everything. You just
So
run in.
how re-
And
reliably how much water do you need to run the motor? What's your like depth to run that
so
motor?
I do a lot of um, wherever I am in the country because I don't have a shuttle partner. Pick a spot, find an access, and run up, and then float back down. And and I don't want to get out of the boat unless I gotta. If I can continue to make my way up through that stuff, it's I want to do it. I do this thing where I run at it full speed, and I try to get right next to there's a big rock here. Wherever there's a big rock, the water is going to go around, but it's also going to scour out underneath it. And usually, if you're rubbing up against that rock as you go past it, it's right where that motor is going to be in that deep pocket below, and you get to keep it eating, right? But when I hit it, I know I'm going to grind and run into stuff. When I hit it, what I will do if I know, say it's I'm right after that rock, it's going to be up in 3 inches, and I can't run the motor in 3 inches. I can kind of keep it going in like 6 ish, and it's grinding. Um, but I'll run at it really fast, and then I'll reach down, pull. I have a cleat that I designed and had Trey make, and every time I bring it up, he's mad at me because he's like, I don't have time to make those. And everyone sees yours and they like make me one like Jeff. Anyway, I pull it up and it's basically an upside down cleat that is a jam cleat. I pull it up with one shot and I let go of it and I reach down and grab the paddle and I just start digging, start paddling. And by the time I'm using my paddle, all the wake that I just created comes in from behind me and goes, all right, let's get you up. And it pushes you over. And by then I can reach down, drop that motor because I've cleared into, say, 6, 7, 8 inches of water. Then I can let that prop start spinning again, wind up and go and keep going. So there's something to doing all this. But if your hull hits it like 6 inches deep, you don't even get that far. Like you have to get out and drag. And
Yeah.
sometimes when you're in 6 inches of water, that's where the swiftest water is. And as soon as you get out, like it's tough to maintain your footing. Then you're grabbing a boat that's being swept down. It's just, whereas with an inflatable, you're just sitting on top of the surface, and it's just easy. So
I fully appreciate the inflatable, so there's definitely
sure you
nothing
do because
lost
you've
on
been
me.
using the iTrek for a while.
Yeah, this is third season with it, and the raft as well is inflatable, so you kind of get
Yes.
the
So that
similar
was my
sort of.
first experience with inflatables. I got a 16-foot cataract that I took my kids, when they were little guys. That was our floating jungle gym on the Susquehanna River, and we camp on the islands and just float through super skinny stuff. The downside of that, it was a 16-foot inflatable, and when the wind came up, ooh,
Oh
you were
yeah,
on the oars. You were not picking up a fishing rod all day because you were just on the oars.
yeah, it's a bitch in the wind for sure.
So that's what these inflatables, the innovative sportsman ones, are low profile. And
Yeah,
you're gonna have wash through. You're gonna have waves. Like you come down through a rapid and there's haystack waves. Hope everything like down underneath you in your lap is like tied in because it's just
yeah,
gonna whoosh wash through there. So get some of those
yeah,
attack trays, those track packs, and anything that's
yeah,
loose before you do that haystack set of waves. Get your loose stuff in because you're gonna lose it.
yeah. And the inflatable thing, um, like I actually had associated getting blown around with inflatables, but I just took my trek to Florida, and I was out in a huge bay fishing for redfish, and it was super windy. I didn't really get blown around that much. I mean,
It's low
I
profile,
yeah, the low profile makes a huge difference. The raft sits up, whatever, foot and a half off the water, and it's just like a huge sail.
right?
So you don't get that with the lower profile. So I'm gonna stop the
But
conversation
by the way,
here, but
I double anchor like a lot. Like my
okay.
setup is I put the anchor wizard one on the back and one on the front. But you want to change gears, talk about summer river smallmouth and fun.
Well, we'll see. I'm gonna do a full report on the osprey whenever I get, maybe 3 or 4 trips. We'll do kind of a preliminary one, and as I rig it out, there's obviously things. I will never be a Jeff Little rig guy. Like, your kayaks have every, bell and whistle on them. I like to strip mine down a little bit more. Um, I don't know if I wanna
Here's the
go.
thing though, like I like to try everything.
Sure. Yeah.
And
That's
and
good.
I would say a lot of my rigging, people would say, "Oh, that's some outside the box thinking." I'm like, I think some of the goofy stuff that I do is a complete ignorance of the fact that the box exists. Like I don't know. I think going after putting track all over inflatables to begin with, is was I don't know. No one else was doing that. Like
Oh, I know. It's a cool concept. I'm really excited to get mine, so we'll kinda see how she does, but, um, so shifting gears to fishing. So when I texted you today, I was kinda like, "Hey, I wanna talk a little bit about pick your brain a little bit about, um, kinda summer finding trophy smallmouth in the summertime." We're talking rivers mostly, but, if we wanna talk about lakes, you have more experience than I do with that. Um, but, I think there comes a sort of time in the year, and we're, July, is it 3rd right now? So, the water levels have kinda consistently been receding, and we're at what I would consider, like, kind of the dog days of summer. We have really low, really clear water, and for me, I actually enjoy fishing this time of year probably more than any other time, because,
I'd
uh,
take winter fishing with higher flow over this any time.
it
That is
depends
my preference.
it depends on what y
It's a
yeah,
different challenge. It's a totally different
yeah.
challenge than this.
I feel like in these conditions, I do really well. I am a power fisherman, but I feel like in wintertime's different, obviously, but any time other than winter, I feel like catching them, you can kinda do it by accident, you know? I don't wanna, like, belittle anybody in the pre-spawn, but, like, if you know how to throw a chatterbait, like, you can catch them because 'cause they're out feeding. This time of year, it's a little different. Like, you can catch a lot of fish, but catching like quality fish can be sort of difficult. So I feel like those bigger fish, if you know what you're doing, you can catch them when nobody else can. And I enjoy, especially in a tournament. I guess when I'm fishing, like when I'm locally, when I'm fishing some of the circuits, like I know I'm gonna place really well in these tournaments because I know everybody else isn't gonna catch them. There's a big percentage that won't catch them. Now you get a big rain and the river pops. It's kind of like
An
every,
equalizer.
yeah, it's an equalizer. But when it's low and clear, it definitely is, and that's what you face a lot of times as a smallmouth angler. Rivers are low and clear for a lot of the year. They're low and clear from really mid-June, probably all the way until like November. You have like low and clear conditions. So a
So
lot of
here's this epiphany that I think I shared with you in the hotel room up in Michigan about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So to the viewer, and maybe not all viewers like fish, into winter, but if you do, you ever noticed, you know, you can get low and clear all the way through the fall, but then the same amount of rain or lack of, somehow once you get into November, December, it's just naturally higher. Like the river just has more flow. What is that? Why is that a thing? It took me decades to figure it out, of looking at gauges and saying, actually, when USGS started doing the prediction and getting it wrong, they get it wrong more often in winter than they do. Like, hey, it should be the simple thing of like, hey, we get 3/4 of an inch of rain over here's a, you can they can do things with, computer models over a watershed and saying we got half an inch here and 3/4, and actually right over here we got an inch, 1.2 inches. So collectively it should be this amount of volume when you get further down in the watershed to this gauge should go up like this much, right? They get it wrong. It's always higher. It always ends up being higher in winter, and always ends up being lower. And here's the key: when there's still leaves on the trees. Think about it.
Taking a bunch of water.
Think about it.
Yeah.
When the bushes and the leaves in the crops and the terrestrial vegetation is respirating in soaking all that up before it can even reach the river. Soon as those leaves are down, they don't take up all that water at the
Just goes
same
straight
rate.
into the watershed. Yeah.
Yes, it goes straight in. And I'm happy as soon as the leaves get down. It's like, yeah, you're going to have more flow. You're going to have, the fish are pushed into more predictable eddies. It's just, yeah, it's colder usually, so they're maybe not going to chase it as far, but I'm okay with that because I like to jig fish in an eddy. I really do. I really do. Like,
Yeah, I
more than anything, I like that singular dunk. that.
that's a that's
Oh,
a
that's
cool that was a really cool observation. I would like to maybe talk with somebody about that, specifically like a ecologist, biologist sort of thing, and see like how much
well, there are
like
hydrologists. There are people
or
that
hydro
study.
yeah, well, we need to find a hydrologist. But that's a really cool. The other thing that um now this was more in one of your videos, you and Russ were talking about the color of the water, and when it's cold, and I've always noticed that the river is like almost like a turquoise, like in the winter time, and you guys attributed that to like plankton die off. Is that what you were
Well,
thinking about?
there's different algae and different, all sorts of different things living in the water. I will say this: if you if you go on the Susquehanna and you look at what the West Branch water looks like, and then you look at what the North Branch water looks like. West Branch is clear, traditionally has a lot of acid mine drainage that kills organisms, whether it's phytoplankton, zooplankton, or anything, algae, kills that stuff. And I'm not saying that river's sterile. Certainly some tributaries that flow into it are. But then you look at the North Branch, brown and full of life, way better fishery. And it's dirty. It's dirty. It's got a lot of, I mean, some of that's nutrient for sure, but a lot of that is living stuff, right? And when it's cold, there's less living stuff. And that kind of teal turquoise color, that I actually associate that when I can see that, especially in the summer, I'm like, there's a spring there.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a chance for all the living things to get into that water. I love seeing that because it means cooler water in the summer, which is one of those hidden spots. You find yourself a spring in the summer. And it's the same thing in the winter. It can be a fish magnet in the winter. So
yeah, for sure. So going back to sort of clear conditions now, because this is what guys are seeing right now.
Let me make it relevant. I fished not this past weekend, but the weekend before. I finished a bunch of my dealer visits in Kentucky, a couple in Tennessee, and then we went into somewhere in Virginia, small flow. I'm going to refer to it as the aquarium because we did a lot of looking at fish without touching them. Super, super clear, tough conditions. And we actually made a video there's one that's coming up, which is 5 tips for low water float trips, where we talk about, I mean, you just, there are things that make it easier, but in that set of conditions, and I will tell you, I mean, I'll spoiler alert, we didn't do good. We saw a lot of big fish, and in water that small, it's even tougher because there's only so many directions that you can come at them. I do better in low clear conditions on the Susquehanna because I know which direction they're going to be looking. And when I have 360 degrees with which to approach them, I can pick the right one where they don't see me coming. On that particular river, there were so few places that you could actually just be in your boat, even with the inflatables. And that made it super tough. But I'm going to back up to just in general, 4 recommendations that I have for getting at those big fish in summer and what kind of water you should be targeting in general. But actually, the first recommendation is to just go fishing at night. If you can do that, actually, this is something I do usually this time of year. I'm up in New England striper fishing with Mike Baker or Gary in New Jersey. And we're going, either going really early in the morning, or we're actually usually with Mike Baker, like we'll leave his house at like 8:30 p.m. and drive somewhere and like surf launch in the dark. And we're just, we're out there striper fishing at night until the sun comes up, and then we go home and sleep and then redo it the next day. If more people did that with bass fishing, you'd see a lot more big fish caught in the summer. And my biggest Shenandoah fish caught in the summer was a 21.5-incher caught on the larger jitterbug, black jitterbug at night. It was a 21.5-incher. And, that scenario I specifically set up so I could fish at night because I was just like, I'm just not getting the bigs I got back in the spring. People do well with the man's baby 1- or those old, subsurface live target crayfish crankbaits, or some of those subsurface like wake style baits at nighttime. you can go full on buzzbait. That's fine. But I really like the subsurface. I think that they can grab those baits. I think it's a little bit easier for them to, with their lateral line and their vision, is to grab something that isn't up on the surface dancing around. When it's just below it, is easier for them to grab it. And at nighttime, if you give them that advantage of eating a subsurface crankbait, that's one of my favorite things to throw for river smallmouth at night in the summertime. Um, but say you're going during the day, or if you just can't go nocturnal to go fishing
It's
in,
hard to river fish at night. I mean,
you gotta be pretty skilled, and you gotta know the water because you're dealing with
yeah,
some
it's
acids.
yeah, and there's just like casting, even if you like, because I've been done a lot of camping on the river where I'll like set up camp on an island and then I'll kind of wade out and fish. Unless you have a lot of moonlight, like casting. There's so many like things to get tangled in the river. It's not like a lake where there's like wide
By the way,
open.
that was my son Cooper who harumphed there a moment ago because he didn't want to walk through the podcast. He did a harump and walked around and went to his room. Anyways,
That's
go
fun.
on.
No, no, I just have had trouble fishing at night unless it's like a full moon. And that if I was gonna go fishing at night on a river, I would wait until it was like a a, a, a full moon so you could kind of see what you're doing. Which
Right.
I've done that a couple times, and you can get on some absolutely stellar topwater bites. But let's say you can't fish in the nighttime. Let's
So
say
if you
you,
go, if you can get out there, mm, as early as you can, and they're just starting to be daylight, that's great. I'm usually I don't get up that early. I just don't. I'm the guy who will fish and get that dusk bite and stay out when it's still dark in summer. And usually because I've run the motor up 8 miles and I'm just like, okay, I'm 8 miles from my truck and the sun's going down. You know, just put that motor on a low setting and just start chucking the buzz bait or whatever it is, and just straining water. But give yourself some low light period. That being said, so that's one. um, the second one is sort of a low light thing, and that's shade. So
mhm.
shade does so much, and I want folks to think shade is more broadly than like here's a bank and here's a bank and here's some trees hanging over and there's some shade underneath it. Shade comes from a lot of different situations. You can have a big boulder with like an overhang and they're tucked up in the shade. You can have like, the wild celery, which people say is eelgrass, but and they'll tuck into the shade and just hang right there. We'll talk more about vegetation because that's its own point. That's actually the next one. But shade from a big log, you know, and they tuck up underneath it. Sometimes it's the tributary of a smaller creek coming in that's had shade totally canopying it, and that water that comes out is cooler because it's been in the shade. So basically, avoiding the area that have the most sunlight. And sometimes, if you're working a bank that has shade, I'm happiest with the longest unbroken section of shade because if it alternates shade and sun, on average, it doesn't have as much of effect. Whereas if you have a long unbroken bank of shade, that water is still cool from the overnight. I know there's water flowing through, but there's just more of a chance of that, you know, being cooler and being more to their liking to move around and actually be active. So look for shade.
How much do you attribute that to cooler temperatures? I versus maybe they feel more
Visual
hidden.
part. Hmm. I don't know, but, like, visually, I think they're better at being predators in lower light. They're not they can be in bright sunlight and be chasing that one minnow around, and I think that they're just better where there is lower light at capturing prey, you know?
Mm,
They're,
yeah,
to a certain extent, blinded in bright conditions, and in shade, they're happier. They're just there, you know? And I'm not
yeah,
saying you
and
won't find them in those laminar flow areas right out in the middle of the sunlight. When they're doing that, though, mm, they're not they're not active.
yeah, I look at shade, and maybe this is just, like this is totally anecdotal. I think most of this stuff is anecdotal just because we're conducting experiments on the water, but I look at that shade as just another form of cover. It's like you see a lion, stalking a whatever kind of thing they're hunting in Africa, like, they're down in the grass, like, they're disguising themselves,
Yeah,
and I think if a smallmouth's out in the open, the prey can see them, so they have to work harder. They don't have the element of surprise, whereas if they're in the shade and something's, doo, 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 swimming, they can kinda come out of that shade, eat it, go back in the shade. That's like the same thing as them sitting in a tree, except shade is like there's no obstacle for them to sort
here's
of
here's another one.
see around.
Here's a bridge. The sunlight's coming this way, and there will be fish lined up on that bridge shade here. The sun gets higher, and then it comes in steeper, and those fish back up, and they follow that shade line of the bridge. Why? Is it what you were just talking about? Maybe, but shade. You can come up with
Shade's
some
good
interesting
regardless, like,
explanations as
regardless of
to
why they
why,
do it.
but it's a
Yeah,
thing. It's a
yeah.
thing, and you need to think of it more openly or free-minded in terms of where is their shade, what is causing the shade, and sometimes the shade is actually just depth. Because as you move from, I don't know if you ever seen those. There's something I've seen the video. I can't even tell you. I mean, it's probably on Instagram, and I've seen it as a short or whatever. But where the diver has all of the different colors, and he's diving down, and as you go down, you see each one turn gray or whatever, and you see which, that purple, it's still purple at the deepest depth, and that's in super clear water. In some of the more, brown water, the deeper you get, it's like there's, um I don't know, it's like wearing sunglasses to them. In that deeper water, they're just happy. Is it cooler down there? Absolutely. But it's also more comfortable. So that deeper water is a form of shade that
Mhm.
isn't like lights on, lights off. No, the dimmer knob has been turned down a little bit. That is shade of how much light is penetrating down deep. And
Well, and I think shade plus a little bit of pocket water, like scoured water, is in a low and clear conditions. You find that you're gonna catch a fish. Like it's
right,
almost like guaranteed. And it depends on what kind of river you're talking about. Like the Muskegon we were on doesn't really get that low summer thing because the tailwater it kind of keeps it. But like the Susquehanna is basically a big creek, and it does go through those fluctuations, and I can tell you from firsthand experience being on it in a couple really low condition areas, if you find depth plus shade, like, that's where some fish are, like, you're gonna find fish, and sometimes that's really hard to find, and
yeah,
and it's hard to recognize because if you're sitting down in, like, your kayak, it's hard to get that sort of perception of if water's deep or not. That's why standing up is a pretty big advantage, especially
right,
when it's low, because you can kinda see 1, you can see the fish sometimes. 2, you can just if you're sitting, like, eye level with the water or, waist high and you're casting in a spot, I've casted in a spot thinking like, "Ooh, that looks good." Then I stand up and I'm like, "Oh, dang, that sucks. That's a terrible spot," you
Yep.
know? Whereas so if you're standing up, you get a feel for finding those, and those are can
It's
be
a,
super
it's a,
subtle.
it's a double-edged sword there, Josh.
Well, because 'cause you're giving yourself away. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
The key is that if you're up and you're drifting through just without moving, that's way less obtrusive than drifting through and fly fishing. Well,
Oh,
I just picked on the long rodders, but you know what I mean? Like if you're moving around and you're dynamic in moving, that's different. Whereas if you can be upright and still and just drift through, and you can just with if you have to at a distance do that quick snap of a wrist, just cast that whatever it is like a beeline, a good long distance. Casting distance is a whole other part of this too, and
I was gonna say
that's where I'm gonna
that
end. That's where I'm gonna end. But let's go to vegetation next.
okay.
So on the Susquehanna, and I get people every time there's a tournament. Oh, where do I go, Jeff? What do I do? And it's like, man, I mean, I'm gonna jump to number 4 as well. 3 and 4, whitewater and vegetation. But we're gonna talk about vegetation first. And I know from going face down into most of the Susquehanna, but we've done it on the Shenandoah and the Rappahannock and some other rivers. If you move 30 feet away from either grass or whitewater, you stop finding your crayfish, hellgrammites, insects, mad toms, whatever it is that they eat. But then you move back to the grass, it's all there. It's just teeming with life, right? And because it's a place for them to hide, but it's also gives out this oxygen. It's the nursery for the young of the year. You get to see those little baby smallmouth swimming by. Like everything happens with the grass. And nationwide, wherever you go, that there's good fisheries, fresh and salt. The common denominator is grass. We have wonderful grass in the Susquehanna, especially in the Juniata. Maddening come like September, and you start losing that grass in clumps, and
Yeah.
it's like, how do you fish that? You know, but the grass means so much, and I I know that in terms of that's where the food is, right? That made sense to me. But it wasn't until last summer and I was filming Jody Queen on the New River that in a tournament setting, he recognized, hey, the Whopper Plopper or the Choppa Bite or whatever top water that everyone did pretty good. And the week leading up to it, he had done well early in the day with that top water. Um, he didn't capitalize on it, and he was deep into the leaderboard, like not doing good, but he had the instinct. The sun is up. I know people aren't catching him power fishing. They're definitely like the top water. If they got it, great. They've got a good, they've got a couple bigs. Um, but if they didn't, what is, and he went to the grass. He went to deeper grass, and really he just started, you would have the grass laying like that, and he would just trickle a jig and let it linger right next to it. And each little clump of grass, he just let it sit there a minute and then drag it a little further. And really what he felt, what he observed after the tournament was, I fished that somewhat, and I say deeper, and he was probably in like 7 feet of water, right, with good grass and in decent flow, but not really fast. He's like, that only really worked when the sun was up and there were no clouds. And he's like, I believe the amount of oxygen that vegetation creates, like, sure, there's shade for them, but he's like, I feel like they move and bury in that grass, and they can be hiding underneath it and see left and right. And if there's food and it comes close, they're going to come out to it. But targeting, you know, grass when the sun is up, with finessey things that you can pull in the direction that the grass is lined up on. That's the key, is that you're doing bottom draggers or something that's slow, that it comes down and pulls right next to them. They're like, "Are you kidding?" Well, okay, I'll eat that. So the oxygen production is part of it, right? Um, I think that, his recognizing that, like, hey, on day one, where I got the 20 and I started getting other ones, and basically it made his tournament as soon as the sun came up, and he had like, he had about an hour, and I don't even think it was 2 hours, but he had a period of time where, you know, he didn't move to swift moving water. He didn't move to shade. He moved to full bright sunlight directly on that vegetation in that 6 to 8 foot range. So vegetation, makes sense on the Susquehanna, because it's where all the food is. You can chuck a top water bait, the bigger shower blow, take that long cast because it's a big bait and you can just whoosh, send it way out there. If you're into choppos, whatever, top water buzz bait, whatever I still like the subsurface crankbaits. Make those long casts and put it on the upstream side of a grass bed. They're going to be near it because that's where the food is. So that's grass. But my number one, my favorite, and this is the only thing that Jameson and on that river in Virginia could get going. Whitewater. We struggled, and we saw big fish that were laying out in bright open sunlight and laminar flow areas, and they would swim right up to you and be like, "Hi." Every time. It's just like you're in this pool that, like, most of that river, understand, it was a small river that has big fish. Like, there I don't think there was any part of that river that we couldn't cast from one bank to the other. That should tell you something, how far up in the watershed we were. But where we did get them going, we had whitewater, and there wasn't a lot of water, but where we would be coming down through, some riffles and run aground and stop. Get out, or just stay put and take your buzz bait or whatever it is and chuck it way down there. I ended up doing well with like it's a buzz bait that I make. I think it's only a 1/4 ounce. It might only be an 1/8. I don't know. It's a smaller finessey buzz bait with all the, usually if the hook's back here and the head is here, they kind of like mushroom out. This one was all tucked in. So it was all like all of the threads were almost minnow shape instead of like a big umbrella shape or mushroom shape. So real finessey, but where I finally got started connecting with some 16s and 17s, I was chucking it way downstream into whitewater, and Jameson did the same thing, and that's how we caught what we caught, which wasn't a great day. I think we did 10.3 miles one day, and I'm telling you, it was a 10.3 mile hike. Like, even with the inflatables, it was tough going in small water. I was excited to bring him there just because it's a place that I know that it's actually the first river that I've been on and caught 3 20-inchers in one day. And that's been a long time ago, but like I've seen, it's one of the rivers I've seen more 22-inch fish come out of than anywhere else. And it's something that locals know that it's good. But like, it's not a destination, and it's not easy, and the access sucks. And I wanted Jameson to, and it's not real far from him. It's not close, but he lives in North Carolina. I'm like, you need to be coming up here to this. And he got an eyeful, and he's like, I mean, day one, I think we did 2 days, and day one was the better float. And there was some nasty, like in higher water, like there was some, yeah, that's gonna flip your kayak water. Like it's just going to, like really technical stuff. But he got an eyeful, where I think day one there was 9 fish that I look at and think, I don't have to ask. I know that that fish is over 20. It's not borderline. It is over 20 and countless other 18 plus. So he got a he got to see it. And that was my motivation. Like, hey, I want you to understand what's here. So
Sounds like a place I want to go.
yeah, I'll take it.
So,
I'll take it.
all right, sounds good. So I'm gonna add. So your
Do you have a
4
helmet?
things. What's that?
Do you have a
No,
helmet?
I
You
don't
should
have a
get a
helmet.
helmet.
I have a motorcycle helmet.
You should have a
uh,
white helmet.
so you listed. Um, okay, let's. What was the very first one?
Go at
Was
night.
shade? Yeah, night, twilight, dusk,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
first light.
Yeah.
Um, shade, grass, whitewater.
Whitewater. All right. Now
Yeah.
let's shift and talk about small rivers, right?
Can I add? I'm gonna add 2 more.
Yeah,
I'm
do
gonna
it.
add 2. I'm gonna add my 2, and I've talked about this on the podcast, so it's probably gonna be no
I mean,
surprise to
springs if you can
anybody.
find them. Whew.
Yeah, springs for sure. This is a little more of like it's not necessarily a location as much as like how you're approaching it. Um, upstream approach always when it's low. Like I do not do downstream floats. I think it's a disaster. And the main
Was for
sort of
Jameson and I, and it was the only way we could do it.
yeah, and sometimes you don't have a choice, depending on the situation. Like I do more wading in tournaments than I do am in the boat in the summertime because I like approaching it from very slowly and finding those sort of like spots um going upstream because I can read a river better going upstream. Like driving the jet boat is like a perfect example. Like if I'm going upstream, you can just see the features of the river easier
And you
going
have more
upstream.
whoops moving downstream with like more
Wh-
hard hits coming downstream with a jet than you do going up.
Big time. Yes.
Oh,
Yeah. Probably
maybe
mostly
I'm the one
because
that should have the helmet when I go with you.
I know. Um, but I going upstream, I can see things. But the main thing for me is all the noise and the sediment and everything that I'm sort of disturbing, it's going behind me. Like
Yeah.
it's getting swept behind me. If I eh, you know, underwater you don't really know quite how much noise you're making, but if I'm like trying to be quiet and I kick a rock, flip a rock up or I trip or something, all that noise is going with the current. So if I'm going upstream, theoretically, those fish would have to be pretty close for them to hear me if upstream of me. So um, going upstream is a big thing. And then also, you mentioned it, but long, long casts,
Yeah.
like to
But
the point
that is
where you
also a double-edged sword because, like, even with my 7-inch scented jerk shad, which I love throwing and skiing back this time of year, if someone doesn't subscribe to the little stuff, go and find one from like go find the thumbnail that says selfish. Watch that. That was when it clicked for me with that 7-inch scented jerk shad. But I will cast that thing and at full cast length with the rod pointed at it, which is where you gotta be. You can't throw something out there and have your rod tip up and be reeling it in and expect to get any sort of hook set. Braid to fluorocarbon leader, launch it, which is going to give you more distance anyways. Moderate action rod really, really lets it launch even more. But getting it out there, it's like if one hits it right away, and you're just doing the reeling down hook set and not swinging on it. I mean, which is what I'm learning. I do better hook sets when I just reel into them. I really do. But anyways, with all that line out, with the wind that caught it or the current or whatever is out there, the more the line that's out there, the more that there's curvature in something that is going to keep you from getting the hook into them. And so it is a double-edged sword, and you have to think in
No
terms
doubt. Yeah.
of ways that you're. So if you're casting, there's this arc from where you release it to where it lands. If you can flatten out that arc by thumbing the reel of the bait caster, which limits how far you go, or I do a thing where I cup the line coming off of a spinning reel, where that arc, instead of being an arc when it touches, because they'll look and they'll be like, they'll freaking Randy Moss it. They'll just, I got it.
Know.
And if you don't have that line straight, you don't catch that fish with all that line out. So think in terms of way of flattening out that arc so it's straight when it touches down. Feathering the line coming off the reel or thumbing it. Now, I would contend I'm always going to this starts fight with people with bait casts, and I like bait casters, but I'm more of a shorter cast, more frequent cast with a bait caster. I can cast much further with a spinning reel and a moderate one. I like that Rain Shadow Judge that I built on. That thing's amazing. But flatten out that arc. Find a way to and what I say is where the spools it's coming off here. I kind of cup it like this, which the line kind of, as it's spiraling off, you're just slowing that down so that there's backward pull on it, and this becomes this.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Yeah, and a little interject a story here. You're talking about Randy Mawson, smallmouth. I once firsthand witnessed, it was not me casting at it, but I was right behind the guy, a smallmouth jump onto the bank to catch a lure. So it literally
didn't count.
Yeah, literally the bait was a long
was his tail
cast,
touching the water? Because it counted if his tail was touching the water.
No, this thing went full on like flopping on the bank. It was chasing a shadow of something that aggressively that it beached itself. I was looking at the guy that did it. I was like, did that just happen? And he was like, holy crap, dude, I've never seen that before.
He's that orca whale going after that seal.
I know, it was crazy. But yeah, I mean, the long casting, I think some of that stuff, I don't, maybe you articulate things that you do better than I do. I kind of just like, I do it and I don't know why. There's things I do with long casts that I tend to try to throw past things. Like if I'm going to do that, like I'll try, if I have like for instance, we're talking about shade. If I can see a shady spot underneath a tree or a bush or a rock or whatever you got up there, and I'm like, that looks like there should be a fish there, I'm going to get as close as I can get, but as far as way I can get, if that makes sense. And then I'm going to cast past that area, like as far as I can get past it. And then I'm going to work that bait so it's like naturally coming into the area that I'm trying to catch the fish in. Now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of times where you want to like, because you get a reaction bait. You do.
That's just my approach. Is if the fish is there, I want it to have already skipped twice going in, skip past them, and then I rip it back in that direction. That is a thing that gets them fired up if they weren't even thinking of eating. They're just like,
it does. You're right.
Just moved in it went. All right, it's running from something. I better eat it before something else gets it.
Yeah, it depends on the mood of the fish. I think
Yeah.
sometimes they do like that hard entry where it like triggers a bite. Other times you'll cast in there like, and they just like you'll see them, they're out. For
Yeah.
whatever reason, they're that spooky. And I think as
Typically,
the
though, the big ones, if you create that disturbance, you've pissed them off.
yeah, most of the time, unless you're throwing a mag draft or something, then they might just think it's like a competing fish or something. Um, But yeah, it depends on time of day too. Like a lot of that. There's different techniques for different sort of circumstances. The hard entries definitely effective, no doubt. Other times I think a soft entry can trigger a bite. And
Honestly, I think the mag draft, the full size Chapo, the full size shower blow, those are all hard entries. Those are all the bull shad. Any of those big baits that just, I mean, that biggest fish says, "Are you kidding me?
yeah,
How dare you?" And
yeah,
and
for
and
sure.
and they go for it. They go for it because
Swim
they're
bait guys will tell you, dude, they're like, I'll throw a 9-inch glide bait and I want to make as much noise as possible. I don't I don't know. We're talking about universally applying different things. That river that you were in Virginia, you don't want hard entries because those fish are just gonna be like, screw you.
no, and what happened is, I did start with the full size Chapo and did my dialing back the progression of aggression. I talk about this in a lot of my videos where you start fast, big, noisy, flashy, everything dialed up, and then you ratchet it down till you find the most power fishing presentation that you can routinely get bites. If I mean, and I used to do this. If you always start, for me, the most dialed down is actually what I caught who that door shack fish on. It's a 4-inch scented jerk shad that is on a hook that I make that's kind of belly weighted. That is my most dialed down presentation that I have. That is the most like, hey, I'm not like, I've gone through all the big stuff and nothing's working. They're not eating jackhammers or spinner baits or even a, a 5-inch or then 4-inch diesel minnow, and then I've gone down to the underspin and like nothing's working. So let me dead stick this little 4-inch minnow, and that always gets something to eat it. It just does. And believe it or not, that's what the personal best smallmouth ate was that 4-inch scented jerk shad.
Yeah, it
But
doesn't surprise me. I mean,
but
yeah.
but that was I don't want to start there, because if you start there, yeah, you're always going to be catching fish, but you're starting with investing a lot of time in something that it's not covering a lot of ground and doesn't weed anything out. It's I mean, short of just starting to throw gold trout magnets, like you're catching everything, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. I think there's different scenarios where if you are starting from absolute scratch and you're just like, I need to develop a pattern, right? And you need to get some like action. You need to get some like you need to they use the term search baits, but you need to cover water enough to where maybe you're not catching anything, but you're moving stuff or you're seeing
So
some activity, you know?
summertime, where you have a big enough river that you can sacrifice some water, I do
Right.
crash and learn. Instead of
Yeah.
crash and burn, it's I move with the Torito at full speed, and it's clear, and I'm just like, yep, I spooked that big one there. Spooked that. Where were you? You were in the shade of that log. Okay, this next one. Okay, what did he scoop from? He was on that
Yeah.
shade line. Okay, we move into the deeper part. Oh, there's 5, and 2 of them are big, but that was deep wood in like 8 feet of water.
Yeah.
I've just seen 3 different places in short order that I'm like, okay, now I know the location, the cover, structure, depth to go looking for. I'm not going to catch them, but if I ran through there and trashed it, crashed the area, I'm learning. Okay, now I
Yeah.
can slow down and do my stealth approach thing. So
Yeah, and then there's, like, sort of the other side of the coin where you have a pretty high certainty, like, tournament morning, you're like, "Okay, I know where an 18-incher lives.
yeah,
Like, I wanna go catch that fish." And that's where, like, waiting, getting super far away from it, and, like, soft entering a fluke or something into that spot because I know that fish is sitting there. I have a spot that I won't tell anybody about on the White River that I've won a ton of tournaments on, and it's, like, the most innocuous, like, little, like, nothing. It's push water, but it's like,
something everyone else misses.
for whatever reason, there is, like, you know, I can catch a limit in this little, 10-yard push water section. They're just fish coming there, but it's usually by the middle of the day, people crash through it and ruined it. But, like, if you get to it first in the morning, like, I can usually catch, 3 or 4 good fish on it. Those are spots I'm like, really, those are super valuable in low and clear water. Like, if you have those spots, like,
Yeah.
you need to be super quiet, super careful. If there's one thing I learned from,
And
reading,
that's worth a
like,
fucking a 4-inch scented jerk shad in for a shot.
yeah,
Going
yeah,
soft.
for sure. Yeah,
Soft
it's
in.
soft entry, get him. And the other thing is you're like, sometimes I think if you know there are multiple big fish in the area and you get one to eat, you scare the rest away.
Yeah.
You can catch one. I know Jeff's real
You
big on,
watched
like,
enough of my videos to know what I do?
I know you paddle away and freaking take it out of the area, which
Yeah.
that's that's another thing. It's another valuable thing. I have trouble doing that though because every time I do that, the fish just like swim right back to where they came from. Like somehow they know where to go back to. I mean,
Think
I
about
don't
it.
have.
You just weight it up to a riffle. You're catching them in the push water in the upstream. If you can release that other fish down there, why wouldn't you? Because he
Oh
will
yeah,
run back to his buddies and be like, just look
yeah,
freaked out, and
yeah, for
and
sure.
then they want to
No,
eat.
yeah, no doubt. And I usually will let spots rest like that anyways. Like I'll catch one and then I'll
Sure.
I'll let them kind of because the fish you catch is like making all kinds of racket in that spot. So you want them to kind of go back to neutral. Um, but yeah, I mean it's an stealth is such a huge thing when it's low and clear. Like for me, if you're stalking big fish, if you know where they're at, if you're searching for them, a little bit different. You kind of want to get the reactions and see them where they're at. But if you're like kind of like, hey, I have a really good idea that one's here, like you want to just like not let them know you're there.
Yeah.
But
Let's
yeah,
talk about like macro view of a smaller to medium sized river. Um, I I have videos that actually, if you look at on the YouTube channel, there's a there's a playlist called Top 10, right? Um, and there's one, and I can't even remember what it's called, but it's in there. But it talks about connected water. That's not the title. I'll have to look up and tell you what it is. But it's the concept of is and it happens on the Susquehanna, which is a huge river, but it's so much more important on smaller rivers is the concept of how much running room do these fish have? How much really hunting range is there when the river gets low? Are they trapped in a series of little micro pools? There's probably not going to be big fish in there. Uh,
mm,
they're going to want to be in that bigger, longer pool, usually at their heads or the tails. And sometimes they get in the middle in those high water spots where the current, gets pinched by like just the bedrock coming up to the surface and dropping back down. And it creates a little bit more current, whatever. If there's a large hunting range, like a longer pool, that has a lot of connected water in a lot of different places for a big fish or a big set of fish to sustain their, you know, which is not where they are in the spring. In the spring, they move up into where you have those isolated water pockets where they basically, I mean, I know these fish can go wherever they want, but if they have to like turn themselves sideways to flop up through to get to the next pull up, it's kind of in isolated water as opposed to connected water.
Well, and a good example of that would be like in the low and clear of summer, you come up on a spot and you're like, oh my gosh, there's 4 foot of water here. There's a tree. Like this looks really good. But you look around and it's gravel bar, gravel bar, gravel bar, gravel bar. There's nothing, there's nowhere for them to
All
go.
that's there. Yes.
Yeah, the chances that there's gonna be, an 18, 19, 20 incher is probably pretty low because they just don't have the forage base in that tiny little area to sustain themselves. They do need more like, okay, well, if there's, you know, 100-yard stretch of bank that's like got some depth to it, that's maybe that would work. But a
Right.
little pocket the size of a school bus like that, there's gonna be fish in there. Like you're definitely gonna catch fish. But I
Yeah.
think
It's
those
it's
sort of
13 to 15-inch fish top end,
exactly. They
not
cap out at a certain
yeah.
size just because they don't have that. Bigger fish require more food, they have
You
more
need a
food.
larger hunting range.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, I learned that fishing the Rappahannock, which is a sandy substrate that has some ledge rock and wood factors really prominently. Like wood is a big deal, but there would be, I mean, there would be float trips I do in the summer where I'm out of the boat more than in it, but where you where you get down to a pool and you're like, oh yeah, this is the first time in like the last mile and a half that I've looked downstream and going into that bend way down there, I can paddle the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to run aground. So maybe this is the head of a pool where it's like the active spot for a long hunting range. So maybe get out of the boat. Maybe don't just go right into it and then send them scattering. I know in the Rappahannock, I tended to find those in the summer low, and really just paddle through them and only fish the tail end. The last part of the pool to me is so critically high importance for big fish. And it sounds like your pushwater spot, might have been in the end of a pool.
Oh, yeah.
Just
Big,
yes.
long
Okay.
pool.
So corner pockets, the idea of like, say you got a ledge or riffle or shoal or whatever, we say different things in different parts of the country. Um, if you have shade with a little bit of depth and the ledge rock that goes across or the gravel bar or whatever this linear that ends it, and sometimes it's shaped different, whatever it is, um, left bank or right bank, those corner pockets can be at the end of those long pools. um, you do not want to overlook them. You want to
No.
approach cautiously, and that's where I was talking about, that with the inflatable, I double anchor. I will anchor off the bow and off the stern as I'm approaching the end of a pool. If I'm floating downstream, which you're like, no, Jeff, you should just be walking upstream waiting.
I would not.
You're, you're,
Yeah.
you're not wrong, but I'll drop the anchor off the back and stop and have that super long whoosh go way down there and hit that corner pocket and bring that scented jerk shad out at full speed or whatever it is I'm doing. But I don't wait until I've drifted to where I can see it to cast to it. My bait arrives way before anything that's down there can see me. And that's hard to do when it's super low and clear. Things that do help you, though, are the whitewater.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the another thing I'll add too is just kind of an interesting observation that over the years I've had in low and clear water. So we have my home. Well, I don't know if I'd call it my home river, but uh, Sugar Creek is probably my where I cut my teeth fishing for smallmouth, and it.
I'm not being rude, by the way. I'm looking up that one video with
Oh,
connected.
you're fine.
Keep talking about Sugar Creek.
Yeah, so it is notorious for float traffic, like recreational float traffic. It has several liveries on it that just pump tubers and kayakers, and most of the rivers around here, around my area, are like that, and they're smaller rivers, so just the fish are getting pounded with just noise all day long. And one of the things I found, I actually, it's, oh gosh, probably 10 years ago or so, I was in I ended up timing this float terrible. I was in the middle of all these wreck kayakers, splashing kids out of their kayak, doing, all kinds of stuff. And I pulled up on this little area that I knew that there were some fish. And we're in the middle of it was an overnight float, middle of the float. I pull up on the spot and I look underneath my kayak, and there's like 3 or 4 18s like just right underneath my kayak in probably 4 or 5 foot of water. And I was like, "Oh wow, those things are like
Used to
they're
it.
they don't give a shit that I'm sitting here." So and all those wreck kayakers, half of them have one rod with the inline spinner. They're not actually fishing. They're just like,
The Rooster
messing
Tail
around.
Brigade.
Yeah, and I remember to this day um, I had a tube on, a green pumpkin tube, and I literally just put it right over the edge of my kayak. I flipped my bail, I dropped it right in front of like these 3 things, and all of them just boom, just ate it right underneath my kayak. I caught all those fish right underneath me, one after the other,
Because
and
they're
it
used
was
to that commotion.
yeah, it's like they did it. So if you do get into a situation where you get a bunch of like traffic, sometimes those fish can like get numb to that noise, and you could take advantage of it. I caught a kicker fish last year in one of the tournaments that I was fishing in, and I floated over it, and it was sitting on the backside of a rock, and I was like, was that a smallmouth? I literally floated over it. I'd waited up all day, fished, I had a limit, and turned around. I was coming back. There was only like 30 minutes left in the tournament. I floated over this boulder. I was like, that was a nice smallmouth. I flipped around. I could still see it. It was just like sitting behind the boulder. I threw a Ned rig right in front of it, and it
Yep.
just ate it. Like, because it been getting floated over all day. So that's another thing to kind of pay attention to. If you got in those situations, you can kind of use that to your advantage. So
Fish was feeling neglected. All these people came here. No one brings me anything to eat.
apparently it really wanted that net rig.
All right.
So
That's my top 10 videos, right?
mm,
And that first one, 37 decisions to find the right lure, that's a good one that helps you dial in the right presentation. Somebody asked me to basically outline a criteria for changing what you're throwing based on the conditions. But that's not the one I want to show you. There's one actually says connected water, a lesson 20 years in the making. Oh, and there's the selfish video right behind it. But that particular video on connected water it really is a low water concept that you need to understand to stop spending time on isolated water. It's like there's little, I don't want to say micro, but even just small pools you shouldn't fish. Like if you want to catch 18 plus inch fish, there's certain spots that it's like, Yeah. Do you really need to catch 3 more 11 to 14-inch fish? Or can you just move past it and find that longer unbroken water that is connected to other water that's that larger hunting range? And I it's funny, it's a concept that's so important to medium and small rivers, but I actually demonstrated on the Susquehanna, which is enormous, which is harder to figure out, is it connected?
Yeah,
How
because in that I've watched that video, it was like I was looking at the visuals are difficult to tell just because it's so massive.
it is.
Um, but I will say this, like so you can learn like when it's low, like you can see a lot more stuff in a river just because it's low and clear. But when it's like ultra low, like I mean like as low as it ever gets, you can learn so much about the river when it's like that because the areas that hold water are like, oh, that looked the same when it was, another foot higher. But now that it's like a foot lower and everything's like as low as it could possibly get, this is the last place standing. And those
My
fish know that.
my longest smallmouth to date was a Rappahannock fish, was 22 and a half inches. I got a 20 and 3/4 and like three of them in the 19-inch range that day and a bunch of 17s and 18s. And I was either launching a green pumpkin tube a very long way or launching a 3/8 ounce full size, like regular white buzzbait a long way. And that was the day that I'm like, okay, just the ends of the pools. That's because like I forget how long the float was, but I'm like, I can't fish all of it.
Mhm.
So I just have to fish the best of it. What is the best of it? The ends of the pools in that fishery. Um, but it was during historic drought conditions. Like the guy that shuttled me at the campground was like, Jeff, I'm not gonna like I called him, I'm like, I'm coming tomorrow. He's like, don't, no, it's too low. And I showed up that morning and knocked on his door. And like he had the campground and everything closed. He's like, we haven't been like renting boats because it's too. I'm like, Steve, I'm going. He's like, you're insane. He's like, you're gonna like have to sleep out there. I'm like, if I have to, cool. Like, I'll deal with it. He's like, that's not. He's like, this is a bad idea. I'm like, I'm doing it, Steve. And he's like, all right. And he's like, let me shorten it, this float trip by 2 miles. I got this other access. He's like, I'm gonna be there for only half an hour after it's dark. And after that, I'm going home and going to bed, and you've missed it. I'm like, okay. So I did it, and it was this. I mean, it was the shin bashing death march, which I actually used that phrase in the video that I'm gonna put out there with Jameson. Um, it was tough. It was really tough, and it was a lot of not fishing in order to fish only the best. And it was one of my best days ever fishing. So paring down it to what is the absolute um, sniper style, like you get one shot and it's that corner pocket at the end of the pool and you better get it right and not hang it in that tree because that was it. Because once you screw it up, it's like, yeah, that was
We've
your,
all done that
yeah,
before.
you goofed, and there he goes. There you see that black tail cruising at a distance. You're like, oh.
I know.
So you know, super low conditions is tough, but you can make it work. And I think the part that makes it work sometimes is that no one else is doing it. Those fish haven't seen anybody in a long time. So
Yeah, or they're at least not, uh, they're not taking the time to sneak up on them before they get a shot at them. I
right.
think some people do fish in those conditions and they think it's like just the same as, a month prior, and it's just not. It's just a lot different. Those big fish after that kind of post spawn feed, they go and hunker down in spots during the day. Like they're not out cruising around a lot. Like they're kind of stuck in their little area, and you have to be really careful if you want to catch them. I mean, you just
Yeah.
spook a lot of them.
You know, it's
But
the best fishing ever when it's been super low and clear for months, and then it
get a
finally
flush. Oh, I know. Trust me, I know. If it's been super low
like
and clear, and you
like
get like an inch of rain,
like
hang on
call
tight.
off, risk losing your job, just go.
Oh yeah, because it just flushes all the like little critters that have been. They have nice little permanent homes that just upends them, and
That
those
was the
fish.
condition in that river bassin tournament where I got that 610.
Yeah,
It had
I'm
been low
hoping to.
ever.
I'm hoping we get for that Bassmaster event later this month. I hope we get about 2 inches of rain like the day before, but it's probably not going to happen.
So you'll get thunderstorms and you'll get tributaries that'll pump out a mud line and fish those mud lines. You know,
Right.
get your jackhammer back out and fish that muddy water. Get your flashy, big, thumpy, noisy, whatever, and put it on those mud lines because they'll fish different. But once you've outlasted that mud line, like get back out in the middle of the river and throw your regular finessey, soft entry type, whatever you do,
Yeah.
clear water. Um, you can absolutely on the Susquehanna have like three different distinct patterns for three different um, turbidities, three
Oh
different
yeah.
wind polarities. Like the Juniata will be one color, and the middle lane will be a different color, and then the North Branch. If you had like a thunderstorm that hit Mahantango Creek and it's spewing mud, like that bank's gonna be jackhammer water for the day, usually
Right.
last a day. But you like throwing a jackhammer, you get some mud from the thunderstorm, enjoy it because
Yeah,
because
for
it'll
sure.
work. It'll work.
Well, I'm gonna wrap this up. We're an hour and 45 minutes in, so
What's the record? Who's gone the longest?
I don't know. I think we've had a couple over 2 hours, but we split them up into 2 episodes usually if it's like that. Oh, I know you could keep going, Jeff. I have full confidence you could break the record. But we're gonna get you back on to talk about other stuff.
Cool.
Um, the go check Jeff's. He puts a lot of his heart and soul into his YouTube channel. So the little stuff, super full of just absolutely high level content for smallmouth guys. Like get on there, binge watch it. You get
Here's a tip if you're new to it. Um, it's July. Go watch the July playlist. There's a playlist for everything I've produced in the month of July. That's going to teach you timely patterns that you can go out and fish them. Now it's all over the place. There's going to be some striper and redfish and there's probably even going to be catfishing, but you'll find something. You'll go back there and title largemouth but then it's like, well, that's clearly him holding a smallmouth. So yeah, go watch smallmouth content from the July playlist, and you can do that all 12 months and really be um, ahead of seasonal patterns before it happens. It gets to the end of July, watch some August content, and that will get your brain thinking in terms of like, okay, what I got to make sure that I have in my tackle box, or what do I need to be looking for when I get on the river on Saturday morning. That's gonna help you a lot year round. So there's a
yeah,
there's a playlist for every month.
yeah, tons of good stuff on there. I mean, even if you don't sort by playlist, like you can just like click on a random smallmouth video, and there's going to be some good shit on there.
It's the struggle
Uh,
though. I think with that format is that people only watch the most recent stuff, and that's why I do try to hustle to get stuff out as quick as I can. Like I edit quick and I launch it, then but it's just human nature, and to just look at what, all right, we'll wait for him to come up with something new. Like, oh, please don't. There's way over 1,000. And honestly, recently, in the last month, like June was the best month I've had on that channel in terms of my reach. Like I think the algorithm is rewarding me for just doing like smallmouth. And
It was really just because you had me on a couple of the videos. Let's be honest here, Jeff. Let's not.
so
I'm just joking.
it was quality content. And but my point is that, it's doing well because it's doing what the algorithm expects me to do, which is to kayak fish. And sometimes I hop in a jet boat, but it's river smallmouth stuff. And I'm finding that people are digging into my old content because which is good because there's so much of it. Like, I've been producing videos since 2009, and that channel is only as old as 2017. So it's got some old content, but there's been a lot of good stuff that especially in recent years. But dive into the monthly playlist.
I remember when you started that channel, and I also remember when you had the DVDs, the Blue Ridge kayak fishing videos that were. I never did get one of those somehow. I don't know how I didn't, but yeah, check his channel. It's good stuff. Buy Boondocks stuff if you want to support Jeff. He said it, before. Check them out. Boondocks makes some cool stuff. Obviously, cool company. Domestic manufacturing. I'm big fan of the stuff that they put out, and I got a chance to use some of it firsthand when I was with Jeff a couple weeks ago. They make really, really good shit. But yeah, thanks for coming on, Jeff. It was
Enjoyed it.
pleasure as always. We're gonna
looking forward to Wisconsin.
gonna kick some ass, dude. If we don't, we're gonna get made fun of for the rest of our lives. So the pressure's on, bud. We gotta go perform.
You're not helping.
Hey, I put pressure more pressure on myself than anybody. So
Yeah,
but put me on a river with smallmouth. We'll figure them out. So
yep.
we'll figure them out. But yeah, man, it's great talking to you, and we'll get you back on soon. But until next time, give me a free the fighter, baby.
Free that mother fighter.
I love it. See you, dude.
See you.